Okay, so let's talk about a random thought that I have. So, in terms of storytelling, some of the most common forms of storytelling are video, audio, and written form. Something that I find interesting is that each of these forms has its pros and cons. Each of these forms has something that it does better than the other forms. I wouldn't necessarily say either of these forms is overall better than the other form because it really depends on how you prefer to consume the content. Everyone has their own preference. But today, what I want to talk about is the written form. See, because with video form, you have the visual representation, right? So whoever has made that video is basically telling you how, or you are viewing the visual representation of that story in the way that the creator of that video intended it to be. And that video is probably also going to have some audio in it. So again, you're listening to it the way that the creator intended for you to listen. Your visual and audio representation of what that story is, you're getting it from that video. That video is kind of dictating what the visual and audio representation is going to be. You have a similar situation with audio stories. I'm not talking about stories that are being narrated. I'm talking about stories that are written to be presented in audio form, because I feel like stories that are written to be presented in video form versus audio form versus written form, I feel like the approach to writing these stories is very different because these are different mediums. They're not the same medium, right? What I find interesting about written form is that with the written form, you are able to let your imagination take over. You are basically able to create the entire visual and probably even the audio representation of that story in your head. So you are able to imagine it in whatever way you want, and you are able to add whatever little details you want to add. And what's interesting is that not everyone is going to imagine the details in the same way that you do. Everyone's minds work differently, right? So everybody's recreation of that representation is going to be different. Everyone is going to have their own unique visual and audio representation of that story. And I kind of like that. I really like how written stories allow you to imagine the visual and the audio representation of the story in your own way, because you get to recreate it however you want in your head, and you get to add whatever little details you want by yourself. I don't know, there's something I really like about that. This is something that written stories have that I feel like stories presented in video form or audio form, or stories written for the video medium and the audio medium, they don't necessarily have that, because there you have somebody else recreating it for you, which is fine if that's what you're looking for. But there's something I really like about how the written form or the written medium allows you to imagine everything by yourself. So you're able to create your own very unique representation of that story.